Yeah, it is a real pleasure, can I say, to be here today. Politicians say this all the time, but from my perspective, I've been, as has been reflected in Parliament, since 2010, and over every single year of that time, I've had dealings with the AIIA. So from my point of view, it's deeply gratifying to be able to be invited and to be able to take part in an event like today. I had a terrific relationship with the former CEO, Suzanne Campbell. Now with Rob Fitzpatrick, it's a pleasure to be able to work with you as well, Rob, on things that we share and are interested in. You look at the policy program that was put forward by the AIIA, in terms of expanding Australia's digital base, skills base, helping businesses adopt digital technology, implementing digital infrastructure, accelerating digital transformation, all important. And what I've also valued about the AIIA is that you've made yourselves available to inform and guide governments and oppositions alike. And from our point of view, that's deeply respected, and we're very grateful for that important role. When you look at, we're focusing today on the last point of that four points that were put forward by the AIIA. Obviously, it's the most important in terms of digital transformation. But while we'll focus a lot on this, it's worth remembering that the first three parts of this platform are critical building blocks for the country. We still suffer from chronic skill shortages within the sector, and I am deeply concerned about whether the broader Australian workforce will be prepared for the changes and the automation that will emerge in the years ahead. Digital engagement by SMEs still way too low, and that denies them a better, more efficient way to run their businesses, keep existing customers satisfied and build bigger customer bases. And finally, when we're embarrassed by other countries hardly expected to overtake us on the measure of relative broadband speed or access, we've got little to brag about when it comes to infrastructure. Now, in making my remarks this morning, two things. Having been in politics for 7 years, or nearly 7 years, I know you have to start positive, so I'm not going to use the full 30 minutes. That's the good news for you all. I'm hoping to keep it short and sweet. I'm also hoping, in part, to reach for that holy grail of Australian politics, which is bipartisanship. And frankly, areas like government digital transformation, they aren't contentious, so they should easily lend themselves to bipartisanship, and that's exactly what I would like to reflect on in part. We've been, as an opposition, supportive of the actual initial push into government digital transformation. We welcome, for instance, the creation of the Digital Transformation Office. We've taken a keen interest in digital innovation and the promotion of early stage innovation. We released 3 waves of policy in the area leading into the 2016 federal election. And note, I'm going to refrain from pointing out we energetically engaged in this area before the coalition. I couldn't help myself. We took full advantage of the opportunity presented by that election to put forward alternative ways of getting things done. The election's come and gone. We're in year 1 of a probable 3-year parliamentary term. And at this point in the cycle, we've got a critical job to perform, and that's maintaining government accountability, assessing performance, drawing on that to develop our own policy responses ahead of the next election. So for now, our focus is on accountability, and that'll form the cornerstone of the contribution I'll make to you today, because when we survey the performance of the government in the realm of digital transformation, frankly, there's a lot of room to improve. So we'll be bipartisan where we can, especially when it helps create certainty for industry, but we can't, I'm afraid, be dragooned as cheerleaders when we see things going off the rails, and they have been. Now, recently, it was referred to a few moments ago, the AIIA asked the public for their thoughts on the way governments were managing digital transformation, and the work undertaken by Galaxy Research on behalf of the AIIA showed clearly what the public want. They want governments of all levels to undertake this kind of work. In fact, the AIIA survey found 99% of participants want governments to use the latest tech for better service delivery. 99%. That is an incredible figure. When asked about government digital transformation, 70% said they want it to be used to improve the quality and accuracy of service. They want digital transformation carried out to make dealing with government more convenient, much quicker. And the public have been influenced by their experiences elsewhere. These observations aren't groundbreaking. We all have thought about this, but the expectations have been put in place and they've been set at a high level. Those expectations shaped by businesses that consumers interact with online. The public know that these online businesses put a high value on customer satisfaction and feedback. That in turn triggers in customers a realisation, and within the public, that they hold a degree of power and that ignoring feedback comes at commercial or reputational cost. And ultimately, they see no reason, absolutely no reason, why government shouldn't play by these rules with their own digital offerings. And as Rob Fitzpatrick rightly observed when releasing these stats, he reflected on the results and said, quote, "Many expect to have the same experience engaging with government bodies as they would with their bank or an online shopping site. As technology advances, customer expectations keep changing. It's important governments keep pace." He's absolutely right. I'm not just saying it because he's in the front row either. For government, the take-out message is tough. Only a brave politician would ask the public to lower expectation of government digital services. And judging by the AIIA survey results, you wouldn't want to try. When assessing the Turnbull government's performance in using tech to deliver crucial services, only 19% of responders agreed it was up to the mark. So that's over 80% of people unhappy. This is a big deal, but it's even bigger when you consider it in a historical perspective. The scale of the drop of the confidence with government digital transformation and digital services becomes massive when you take into account other survey work. To give you a sense of this, take, for example, the work conducted previously by government via the Interacting with Government report released way back in December 2011. And it gauged Australians' use and satisfaction with e-government services, and it said, through its findings, a number of things, three of them that I'll point out right now: strong preference for the use of e-government service channels. Two, that the use of e-government services is stabilising, with similar proportions using internet to contact government as in 2009. People continue to be satisfied with e-government service delivery. However, there's been no increase in satisfaction scores. But what was the score? Overall satisfaction with the outcome of the service received was as high as 86%. So you contrast it to what you found in your survey to what was found a few years ago. And then also add to it, 82% use the internet to contact the government because it's convenient. Now, people absolutely, and I totally understand this, people will rush and point out you need to be careful comparing different surveys from different times, conducted in different ways under different circumstances. All of that is true, all correct observations. But there's little denying that a large number of digital transformation failures experienced in a compressed period of time have had to have contributed to this slump in support. Census fail, Centrelink robo-debt debacle, the Australian Tax Office crashing repeatedly, and the cost of that as well. I mean, I've got accounting firms that are meeting up with me telling me about how they have had to bring on additional labour at times they would not need to do so just to play catch-up. This is a big cost. All these examples delivering hammer blows to public confidence and trust. And looking ahead, we've got the planned upgrade of the Department of Veteran Affairs systems, and we're currently experiencing, reportedly through the Child Support Agency, a project that's running over time, over budget, racking up $100,000 per day in consultant costs, $32 billion in payments being administered by a system declared obsolete years ago. So even though digital transformation performance is sinking, public expectations will continue to travel in the opposite direction. They won't moderate, they'll continue to lift. And this is going to become a friction point for governments, whatever political colour, in the years ahead. Now, I don't for one moment, not for one moment, argue the process is easy or straightforward. It's not. And I don't argue as well that Labor in office didn't experience its fair share of problems with ICT upgrades as well. We did. And if you look at other parts of the planet, you look at the home of Silicon Valley, for example, they had experienced massive problems themselves. The US government rolled out its website to help manage the introduction of Obamacare. It was so badly overburdened and incapable of managing inquiries, it became the fodder for late-night comedy TV hosts. And the problems with healthcare.gov became the driver for the Obama administration to reach out to tech talent from across some of the biggest names in the sector and bring those people into DC manage the website fix and then create ultimately what became the US digital service. They weren't the only ones. Governments from the UK to the Baltic states all making determined efforts to organise and improve the way they deliver service using digital platforms, and inspired by the UK, then Comms Minister Malcolm Turnbull called up what he was proud to say, the insurgents, as he labelled them, and housed them within a new unit, the Digital Transformation Office. We welcome that, and we still believe it's an important thing to do. Why wouldn't we? It makes complete and utter sense. And the DTO made some headway. Over nearly 15 months, they delivered a digital service standard, delivery hubs, exemplars, 3 platforms to production, 2 additional prototypes, an MOU with the UK GDS, and a digital transformation roadmap that's starting to build the capability of the public service. The digital marketplace, by all accounts, is getting the thumbs up. That's great, and we welcome that. Think it's a good thing. Opening up 500 mil of government procurement to smaller, innovative firms, that's another thing that I've said privately and publicly to Angus Taylor is a great thing. And we would support a similar sort of thing ourselves if we had the benefit of being in government. But I've certainly over that time watched the DTO since its first steps and wondered why they were meddling in projects to help state and territory governments instead of fixing federal government problems or streamlining digital platforms. For instance, you'd be well aware, I imagine in this audience, the government manages over 1,500 websites. It's rumoured to have grown to over 2,000. That is a lot of government expense. That's a lot of government effort. And imagine what users experience waiting through site to site, just trying to get what they want. One of the principal projects to trim back that number and consolidate it into one portal was gov.au. And over 50 people, technicians, consultants, contractors, reportedly roped in within the DTO to help deliver a business case for the project and begin building the site, work that was allegedly demanded by the federal cabinet. And right before the business case, to finally tick all this off, was supposed to be submitted for consideration last July, it gets canned, apparently at the call of the finance minister. This is a waste of resources. It is wrong, the way that has been handled. Government websites are many, government ministers explaining why this has happened, very hard to find. And there are few ministers that have explained what actually happened with the derailment of the gov.au project. Now, in a recent speech, Angus Taylor quoted Mark Twain, as people often do, to say that news of gov.au, the project's death, had been exaggerated. He pointed to toolkits, standards, delivery in some larger agencies as progress being made. But if the project death is being exaggerated, that proof of life is about as weighty as an Elvis sighting. Based on what's revealed in February, thanks for that laugh, when I wrote it, I had a good chuckle. Now I just cry. Fortunately this isn't being recorded by those 2 cameras down the back. Based on what was revealed in February, its Senate estimates, the project's completely stalled. And the slow pace of change and the evidence of these stalled projects, they're all red flags, all of them. And what the opposition's slowly unearthing is more and more evidence of dysfunction. Key senior personnel shut out from meetings with ministers responsible for digital transformation. Poor or failing governance impacting on project management. Cabinet processes and committees set up to oversight digital transformation, not even involving the DTO. Disengagement by senior ministers, or if they do engage, it's just to be part of a turf war. We've heard reports the PM has personally written to departments pleading for them to work with the DTO. A major functional efficiency review carried out into the DTO, not acknowledged by senior public servants at Senate estimates last year, even though those senior figures were specifically asked if such reviews had triggered the reorg of the DTO into the DTA. And talking of that Val-led restructuring, it had triggered the resignation as well of the Prime Minister's hand-picked CEO. Now, I'm not saying the DTO was perfect. No one can say that. No one can say that everything they did was done properly or correctly. But clearly, this level of disorganisation and dysfunction must have had an impact on broader digital transformation. These are not small projects. These are not minor hiccups. Case in point, Centrelink. There's been a lot of coverage of the issue. There's now a Senate inquiry into it. It's becoming now, unfortunately, a textbook example, I'd argue, of digital transformation gone wrong. This is what the Senate inquiry's uncovered. You may not have noticed this or picked it up, but some of this stuff is an eye-opener. Despite promises of data sharing and better cross-government collaboration, we've heard evidence of a failure for the Department of Human Services and the ATO to properly communicate about how data would be used in that Centrelink robo-debt exercise and whether it was even appropriate to use. Now, in a recent speech, Angus Taylor said, we shouldn't, quote, "We shouldn't be living in a world where two different departments are working on similar but different data sets that have been modified from the source of the truth. These silos need to go." He's absolutely right. But the problem is, this is exactly what happened in this robo-debt exercise. Centrelink and the ATO had two different versions of the same data. Two. And were applying it in different ways, meaning the Centrelink version was a distorted version of the truth. Information so muddled, this one made me stop. People were actually given a debt notice or advised they had one that was bigger than the social security benefits they actually received. On top of all this, DHS teams told only correct errors when they're raised by customers. That's the system protection. It was also revealed that collection activity continued even while a debt was being reviewed for accuracy unless the customer specifically asked for a halt. Now, the remediation costs have been massive, taking public servants off the front line and placing them in back office operations to manage complaints and disputes. In an environment where the physical demand for customer service is becoming burdensome. More than 36 million calls to the Department of Human Services unanswered last year. It's important to get digital transformation right. It not only costs a lot to do, but when it's bungled, remediation and reputational costs are significant. All these mistakes threaten the future of government transformation as much as any overdue rollout. It dents public trust. The situation's made worse, I'll add, if you've got a specific agency put in place to manage the change, because the obvious questions then get asked. What did you do to prevent this? What did you do to fix it? And as an opposition, we asked those obvious questions at Senate estimates. We asked them of the Digital Transformation Agency just a few months ago. When we quizzed them, what have you done to get those wayward projects back on track? We've been told, or had the DTA admit to us, they hadn't been involved. DTA, MIA. Not good enough. The government classified the widespread problems experienced by government digital projects as, quote, teething problems. And I certainly agree. A whole row of front teeth knocked out after stumbling and tripping over botched digital transformation, and the response is some pretty poor cosmetic surgery, announcing and re-announcing internal oversight committees. We had a program management office announced to review spending and correct potential project problems, and that was revealed in October. Then in February, we have a digital investment management office announced with exactly the same purpose. And when asked why the duplication, it was revealed it was the same office but rebranded. So things aren't looking good. The DMIO in the DTA will apparently review all ICT projects worth $10 million. Good. But it's a future focus that conveniently overlooks or casts the eyes well above the current mess. And while the Assistant Minister recently said that there absolutely does need to be clear accountability and focus on outcomes, when it comes to digital transformation and ICT investment, he's not spelt out what's gone wrong and what's the fix. He cited the ATO outages and census failures as two examples where that failure meant the government had learnt some real lessons, and then straight after this, the same company that was tied to an $800 million ATO ICT bungle is awarded a huge new Department of Human Services transaction system contract. Now, I absolutely accept, hand on heart, that companies can't be made to continually repent for past sins. But you can't do this type of stuff if you do not explain what went wrong. You have to put in place, you have to be able to demonstrate what you've done to minimise the risk of reoccurrence. This isn't about assigning blame or finger pointing, because the lived experience through digital derailments has performed that job in a crushingly effective way. What's needed is an explanation for what's gone on to deliver the first stepping stone on the long journey towards rebuilding damaged public trust. Now, when the Coalition took office in 2013, they were quick to launch an audit into the quality of the Australian government spend on ICT to assess if it achieved, quote, value for money. And not surprisingly, they narrowed the focus to the 3 years that preceded it, between 2010 and 2013. And while it was quick to launch the audit, it was slow in releasing the report and publicly responding to it. And in fact, we only got a copy of it because the news site Delimiter hounded the government into the submission via a Freedom of Information request. And what did we find? The value for money, for BAO, for business as usual investment across the APS on a whole, reasonable. At that time, the Australian government ICT spend $5 billion. Delimiter's take on the report findings was the spend and project management was, quote, performing to required standards within appropriate levels and only a small proportion of major ICT projects at risk. Fast forward today, flying over fields littered with Turnbull tech wreck on tech wreck, the sort of digital equivalent of the last scenes of Gone with the Wind, what's the response? Let me take you to the words of the Assistant Minister Angus Taylor, penned a few weeks ago for The Australian. He said, when asked to diagnose the problem, that it was, quote, years of underinvestment in IT and digital under Labor's watch. So the benchmark on measuring investment and management, outlined and ticked off by reports commissioned by the coalition itself, ignored, to make that point, blame Labor. Instead of accepting responsibility, they've sheeted home the blame to us. And I know the Prime Minister's sought an era of national agility, but this is taking the cake. Bear in mind that $5 billion I mentioned earlier. The level of ICT investment considered reasonable back in 2014. Last week, we had the government proudly announce that as a result of the problems experienced with digital transformation, the Australian government would lift its spend to $10 billion. $5 billion in 2013, $10 billion today. So now we're agile and nimble. Let's put it in perspective. The coalition experiences double the digital drama and then doubles the digital spend. The harsh reality is it's got to fess up to the problems. And worse still, at a time when senators are being asked to tick off federal budgets containing massive cuts to family payments, childcare support, school and hospital funding, the Turnbull government bragging about an effective doubling of the spend without blinking is offensive. It can't go on. So the opposition believes the only way forward is for the government to do precisely what it's shown an eagerness for. Submit its entire digital transformation program to review. It's got to be independent. It's got to be done at arm's length. Not a desktop review, not underfunded and underdone, but it should find out why so many of these projects have gone off the rails, test the quality of the remedial actions, determine what's been in place to get value for money, establish the governance and oversight arrangements, and determine the likely improvements. Angus Taylor said he would be tough about getting the best bang for our buck. This is his chance to prove it. Clear the air, create the certainty, rebuild trust. I'll end on this point. The Australian government's got a huge leadership role to play in digital transformation. We want to support them in this. The investment can both deliver better service and a much more efficient use of scarce funds. It'll involve local industry, like many represented here in the process, to provide bigger economic benefits. Getting this right is imperative. We want to support it, but there are going to be some important steps that need to be taken in the short term. Thank you.